right, excellent. Welcome to the third Startup Grind chapter event here. So thank you everybody for coming. We have one of the furthest person from Minneapolis, from Belgium. So that's very interesting. Excellent, and thank you again for coming. We have Rob Weber, who is now the CEO, or is it co-founder, or how do you say, of
just a general partner, I would say.
Okay, partner at the Great North Labs Venture Fund. So I'm sure we're all excited to kind of hear more about what kind of venture fund they have and what kind of boot camp they have too, because they don't not only do the venture fund, but they also do a boot camp, which is very interesting too. So in the beginning, we're just going to talk a bit about who Rob is. So can you tell me a bit about yourselves? One facet that everybody kind of already got to know is that Rob and I and Ryan, we started off way back in 2000 or 2001, something like that, together in the industry. So at that time it was freeze.com, and there were only 12 employees, I believe, at that time.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting thing, and that's how his company started growing, and then you rebranded it to NativeX, correct?
Yeah, it basically went through three different names, really three different businesses as sort of the founders and operators. And it was around, so we kind of had this experience founding the company. We scaled to 170 employees, $70 million in revenue, headquarters in Minnesota, but also a big presence in the Bay Area. And then as we were scaling, probably around 2005, 2006, we kind of had our first partial kind of liquidity event. And my brother and I, we decided to start an angel fund. Mm-hmm. So now we were on both sides of the table. We were operators and we were investors. And so the last sort of 11, 12 years, we've been among the more active angel investors in the community. And from that time, we were still scaling our company from about 50 employees to 170 at our peak.
Very nice.
And so it was, it wasn't a full-time deal. It was just something very passive we were trying to do, and we kind of tracked it back after the first 5 years. We now it's been 10 years since we started. Really, you can evaluate the sort of first 5 years of angel investments, and it turned out we did really well.
Great.
So we decided, after we sold NativeX, was the last of the operating businesses we started.
Can you tell everybody how much you sold it for?
Yeah,
I think it's public, right?
Yeah, NativeX was $25 million in cash. It was sort of the third sort of exit event we had, the third and final.
Woot for a St. Cloud company, huh? That's really impressive.
So very capital efficient. We didn't raise any outside. We had one angel round. We raised $320 grand and pretty much bootstrapped it all the way to. We ended up returning over $40 million. Very, very capital efficient business.
Nice.
But
and it was sold to Mop Vista, correct?
Yeah, Chinese advertising company. They had about 500 employees or so. And the company still exists. The brand NativeX exists. There's still some employees in Minnesota. It's been about a year and a half since we sold. I left in August, and we were thinking about what to do next. And after some planning, we decided around Labor Day we're going to launch this venture fund, Great North Labs, and we're just getting going.
Yeah, excellent. And it's you and your twin brother Ryan, right?
Yep. Excellent. And then we have a third partner named James Don Francisco. Okay. James is kind of more running the boot camps. James's background, we met in school about 20 years ago, but he kind of went the corporate route.
St. Cloud State?
St. Cloud State.
So we're both alum there too, so I'm also, my undergrad was St. Cloud State University as well.
Yep, so James he went more the corporate route. We always had this idea of maybe working together, but he ended up at places like Best Buy. He's really big into software management, like agile methodology and kind of running software teams. He got recruited out to Apple, so he spent 2 years in Cupertino running multiple teams with the online store for Apple. They actually set a record, I think it was iPhone 6 when it shipped. They had over $2 billion in sales in 1 day, shut down MasterCard in Europe. So he knows about scalable software. So he's our third partner. And then we also just added another guy named Hugh, kind of a young up-and-coming analyst to help us due diligence on startups, and we'll be announcing our first investments in the new year here.
And you are looking for also a junior or a salesperson right now too? Or
yeah, we're looking for another analyst to go along with Hugh, and then we're also looking for digital marketing help. We want to be the best branded venture fund in the Midwest.
Excellent.
So we'll start with the Midwest, then maybe But
So you're in the Midwest, and your market is kind of all Midwestern companies then for the venture fund, or
we're starting with our home base is kind of Minnesota, but we're looking at the neighboring states plus Illinois.
Okay.
If you want to think of it that way, we think we can deploy. We're targeting about $15 million, and we're on our way. We're actively investing. I can't talk about the fundraising process, but it's going great.
Yeah.
So
Great. So
lawyers don't like me to talk about fundraising
Of
in
course.
public. We'll have an announcement when we're done fundraising.
That's great. And so when companies want to, so there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this crowd here, so a lot of them want to be a part of a venture fund. So what do they have to think about with your fund or other funds that you've, gained experience with doing?
Yeah, I think you just have to, if you're more on the raising money side, probably for their startups,
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to really help with. So with our boot camps, in particular our product management kind of lean boot camp, it's a 15-hour program. I think we've had 30 startups go through it and 100 people since we launched, and this is just the last 3 months. But I think a lot of people come to it thinking, oh, I'm going to get to know the Weber brothers and I'm going to get them to fund my company, and I think they leave after 15 hours going, all right, I now know what I need to do in order to get funding.
Okay.
I think that's half the battle. I think it's really important to know what venture funds are looking for and making sure you're ready.
What kind of key basics that somebody should know?
So
I know growth is a big part of being in the venture fund.
Yeah, I think
With
it's really
VCs.
more the unit measures in your business. I guess I would say there's 3 things we're mainly looking for, and they're pretty simple. It's number one, that you have a large total addressable market, TAM.
Okay.
Venture funds don't want to play in small markets because they're looking for gigantic returns to pay for all their losses.
So if it's niche, kind of like a niche.
Yeah, niche, you might have a good business. It actually, that could play in your favor as an entrepreneur. If you have a more niche-oriented business in a smaller market, you probably aren't going to have a lot of pressure from venture-backed companies.
Okay.
But we're looking for things with a total addressable market of at least $1 billion and ideally more than $10 billion. So that's filter number one. Number two is, the startups, by the time we're going to invest in them, we're at like a seed stage. You're probably going to we're not going to participate in your friends and family kind of round, more than likely. We have a small amount of the funds set aside for that. But most of the things we're doing are going to be seed stage and later.
So seed stage, we're talking about how much money?
So it can be, anywhere from a few $100,000 up to a couple million. That's kind of the range of the check sizes we'll write.
Okay.
But it'll end up, we're really looking for product market fit. So it's, you got to get your product out. I would encourage you to build as thin of a product as you can that solves a priority problem of the customers that you're going after.
Yeah.
And then, and just establish a plan to generate scalable distribution. You don't have to get that far in your distribution, but you probably you can't just have 2 of your friends as customers. You need to have, or users. It doesn't even have to be customers always, depends on the business. And then that's the point where, we can get in.
So you have to build more or less the MVP, minimum viable product,
Yeah.
get it out there, test it with the market.
Yep, and if you require some adjustment, then do the adjustment. And and if you need I think we have a relatively vibrant angel community here. And if you need a little, maybe you can figure out a way to bootstrap it, or maybe get some angels to throw in a little money. Maybe even you could convince us if you have a really breakthrough idea. We'll have a little bit of the fund reserved for that. Pre product market.
Can you list some angels that some of the people here might be interested in the Minneapolis area? Or
I guess I would look at we have some pretty good angel groups. Like Gopher Angels is one. If you can get present in front of them, or like Angel Pole Nation is not really. It's more of a meetup than an organized group that invests together. But and the Twin Cities Angels, I don't really know them as much, but there's certainly. And then there's just individual angels who just write checks and don't associate with anyone.
Yeah.
So, but I think you'll start to, if you kind of track back, you can see a pattern of the more active angels. I would also recommend, some of the angel investors don't do that well, with their investing. So sometimes if you're a new entrepreneur, you want to find the person who's got the new liquidity, who hasn't been angel investing for too long. Don't just find the people who've been angel investing for 10 years, but find some of the ones that are just starting to. They might have more money.
Is there something to watch out about with angel investors and how much you give up of your company in the beginning when you do that compared to when you go to venture? Because if you're going to invest in a company in like a VC type funding, you don't want to have too many angel investors, right? Or too many investment of your company that has been given up, right? Too many shares, more or less, or percentage of the company.
Yeah, I think ideally if you can get, and even the angels want to usually see, probably an MVP and some customer traction.
Yeah.
Or at least, they're going to want to have some demonstrated execution, but they'll pick it up maybe a little bit earlier than a fun one.
But is there a certain percentage of the ratio of this is how many investors I have when you get to the next level, because you always have angel seed, and then you go, you know, the VC, and then you go to, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F.
Well, I think here
Venture.
in St. Paul or broader kind of Minnesota, I think angel rounds it's not terribly difficult if you have the interesting idea and demonstrate some execution to put together a few $100,000 or maybe get, you know, but it's not like the Bay Area where, you know, what we're doing as a fund would barely be like, not even barely an angel round like in the West Coast a lot of times. So, you know, but I think that's where everything is just smaller, you know, on the funding side here. It's like, you know, our seed rounds are like $1 million, and out in the West Coast, it's like, you know, that's probably more like 4 or 5 million. And instead of being a $4 million valuation at a seed stage, maybe it's 10 million. Or
you should evaluate your company about 10 times whatever you're raising. So if you're raising $1 million, then you know you're at the 10 mil. So that's kind of how they evaluate it there. I don't know, how is Midwest similar or a lower valuation, right? Usually, like you just.
Well, if it's kind of I don't know. I kind of look at it as like if it's your friends and family and no execution. Usually it's priced below $1 million, or sometimes even like $500,000, really low. No execution, just straight up an idea. And then usually you start to show some execution. You might be able to get it up more to like, you know, a couple million or couple million for a software startup. And then I think, you know, if you start getting closer to kind of product market fit, you usually see software startups starting approaching more like 3-4 million. But I think the other thing, this asset class. You know, I think in the last week there's been some pretty interesting data shared about venture funding and early stage funding's really been declining quite a bit. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your valuation. You know, if you want to have a vibrant early stage, you know, ecosystem for capital or venture funds, you got to have the funds are going to have to show the right kind of return, or they're not going to have a second fund. So, you know, if every startup is pricing it too high, you know, in the long run, if that punishes the returns, then you're just going to end up with, you know, lack of venture funding.
I've heard a lot in the Valley. I mean, I've never seeked investment in the Valley, but you know, when you get your first investment, you kind of want to see that continued growth, and then after like half a year or 1 year, if you don't get another investor coming on board or additional funds that have been raised, then you're not going to have any more interest, because that's a clear signal to them that, well, you're not, obviously you got some interest right there, you got the initial investment, but you're not growing to the next level. So the growth is going to be a major factor, right?
Yeah, I think I mean, certainly I would say the growth rate usually at a seed stage should be at least 20% month over month, 5% weekly. And it might even be in your first, you know, few months after launching, but, you know, sometimes, you know, we've seen things growing as fast as 100% month over month. So we're not looking for things, you know, we're aiming for, you know, unicorns and decacorns. And we want to accomplish that before we die. So, you know, we're looking for fast growth companies, you know, with really scalable distribution.
Is there like so I mentor for a San Francisco company right now called Growth X. They're kind of like doing accelerator kind of boot camps and stuff like that. And the founder there is from Match.com. He originally was the founder of Match.com. Then he sold. And he said that he wants to invest in 1,000 companies before he dies, right? So, and he's hoping that one of them are going to be that golden one, that'll be that, you know, that diamond in the rough. You have like a plan on how many companies you kind of want to hit? In this phase of this project?
I think I look at our portfolio strategy, I look at that as more of a spray and pray strategy. Okay. When I look at the top performing venture funds, they don't spray and pray. They basically make you know, they're putting, you know, between 5 and 15% of their fund allocations per, you know, they may not do it all on the first closing, but they're really, you know, as they ride their winners, you know, they'll end up maybe 5-10% of their fund at each deal. And so that, you know, if you just look at portfolio theory, like if you have 1,000 companies in one fund, let's say, and you have like a 0.1% in each company, even if you hit the next Uber, it's not even going to pay for the fund barely, right? So, you know, what we want to do is take more concentrated bets in companies that we think, you know, have a good shot. If things go well, this could be a multi-$100-million company and hopefully very capital efficient. You know, some of the accelerators talk about all the markups and they brag about our companies have raised X hundreds of millions. You know, when I hear that, it just makes me sick as an investor. I just see dilution, and, you know, part of the other side of the game is how much of it are you holding at the finish line, not just, how much
Yeah.
I've been a part of 4 companies.
Yeah, can you name them that you've kind
Yeah,
of
so there's
invested
been
in already?
4 companies that arrived at over 50 million or more in kind of exits, and actually a couple over 100 million. There's been NativeX, Field Nation, eBureau, Zencoder. They're all kind of in that range.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we were fortunate that in each of these cases, 3 of the 4 were very capital efficient.
Okay.
They're not all fully exited. 3 of the 4 were completely out of. 1 we're still in partially.
Okay.
So, but I would say the one that had the biggest exit of the 4 actually had the most capital raised and ended up being the worst return of the 4.
Really?
So
You can't say which one.
you could figure it out if you look up their funding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Crunchbase is kind of like a place you can go to.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting thing. If you want to understand whether or not something was a good investment, if you can somehow back into how what the exit price was, and that's not always public, but you can figure that out. And usually there's like rumors about what it is, but then usually you can find how much money went into it, and it's not that hard. I mean, you can get relatively close with like, all right, company raises 50 million, they exit for 120. At the right, depending on how that goes, it's probably not more than 2x, right? Like, yeah. So it's those aren't great investments. I mean, you could do okay. It's okay. It's better than the write-off, but.
And so, what do you think the Midwestern, venture capitalists are looking for if on an exit? What kind of times what are they looking to get on return?
I've asked, so it's not all public. The best I've seen, like around the Midwest region, is usually like 30 to 40x return over some reasonable time horizon. That's pretty typical.
Okay.
The best deal I've ever heard by a fund in the Midwest, it was an 80x return in less than a year.
Oh, do you know what company that was, or?
It was like in 1999, so it's also a timing thing.
That was a long
But
time.
it was done by.
That's what people are just shoveling.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say who it was, but it was a respected one of the most respected venture people I know in the Midwest.
Yep.
And
All right,
and
cool.
it ended up being one of the highest returning venture funds in all time.
Oh, nice.
If you can do an 80x return in less than 1 year, you need to call me or drive over to my house, and we don't need to do any diligence. So you can I'll give you a briefcase full of cash. Yeah. But that's not really realistic. I think ideally you're looking at, as companies scale, it's going to be harder to sustain high growth rates. But I mean, ideally, as you start to hit start getting, hitting stride, maybe year 4, year 5, you're getting up towards like 10 million in revenue. Hopefully you're still able to sustain at least 50% annual growth. And ideally for me, you're not having to raise a lot of additional capital to sustain that kind of growth. Because again, don't want the dilution.
Exactly.
I guess the other part of that is if you're running a startup now, don't just try to repeat how the go-to-market side of how like other companies have operated. There's more and more tools that are bringing efficiency to startups. So particularly, a lot of the money that gets raised in the Midwest is for B2B companies, and I think very often, they go out and use that money to hire a huge sales force and then compensate that sales force. But I think increasingly you're having all these explosion in marketing and sales automation tools.
Yeah.
So that's where that's where a lot of my interest lies, is trying to figure out, like, I kind of think about like, all right, some of these companies that maybe sold for $200-300 million, raised $50 million. Is there a way we could have gotten that done with $15 million with the new tools that are available? And that's what keeps me up at night. Like, and then, and if an entrepreneur partners with us, we all have the same kind of equity basically. So we're all in it together. Let's try to figure out a way to not bring a lot of dilution to the table. I don't know. That's how I think.
A lot of things that I saw on the West Coast of companies getting tons of investment, like 45 million or stuff like that, and then they'll immediately, like you said, they'll go right to, the only way to scale is just beef up our sales team, beef up the marketing team. That's the way to scale. Personally, I think it's false. It's wrong, because if your system's not built to be self-sufficient, you shouldn't need so many employees to make that baby run and grow to the X factor. And that's what most people do. And a lot of companies go under because of it, because then you're sooner or later you're going to flatline, and then what are you going to do? You're going to have to lay off employees because you have too many people. So
then it's kind of a very vicious cycle too, because then you end up with, they probably have stock options, and then they start seeing that look how much capital was in, and how much they're starting to question the value of their options, and it just it's not a good place to be.
Yeah. I'm helping consult right now a company that's called Ideal of Sweden, which there's going to be a freebie because they also help sponsor this event a bit. But it's only 20 people in Sweden, and yeah, they're making already I can't say how much, but they're already in the millions for 20 people and tens of millions. And that's really, really cool. And it's something that
they wouldn't spike the ball because they're, in Europe they don't have playing football.
Exactly.
But I don't know, what would they do to celebrate?
Spike the soccer ball.
Yeah, there you go.
Kick it in the net. So there's a lot of really interesting, buzz in Europe. And I see great potential, just as you do in the Midwest here. It's always everybody's always concentrating on East Coast, West Coast. Obviously, that's where a lot of the funding is. But there's a lot of innovators can come from anywhere. That's what I say at every event. So never be discouraged, no matter where you are. This guy's coming from Belgium, very interested in coming to Minneapolis here, having an office here, which I think is very fascinating. So you can come from anywhere. Innovators, I myself come from a small town of 700 people. And I've lived in Europe for 15 years, and we went to the same SCSU alumni school, so you can really, you put your path, your goal to it, and you can really achieve a lot, and it doesn't really matter where you're from. But yeah, so you've kind of mentioned some of the companies you've invested in. Is there kind of like a tip that you're interested in? Like, what's your in thing? What's of interest for Great North Labs? What kind of companies are you excited about to kind of invest in? I know we have a Bitcoin company here too, so she might want you to invest in her too.
Actually, I don't know. Since I've been about 12 years old and starting up businesses, so 25 years ago, it's always just been about a growth model. Like, I don't really care what it is, what industry, as long as I can understand it, I don't care what industry. I do think, though, there are characteristics of things that are working better in the Midwest. I think it tends to be I look at it as, industries that aren't real sexy a lot of times. They're kind of overlooked industries. Oftentimes, proximity to customer is important, and I think there's certain industries here where there's a lot of, there's certainly some customer concentration which can help, in terms of being, and then I also think complex businesses that have multi-sided kind of markets with multiple stakeholders. I think I think the Midwestern companies tend to solve those problems better than some of the other places. Yeah. So we're seeing things in, really all over the place. I think the one area we like things that can kind of get quick to kind of market validation. Okay. And so I think med device doesn't really fit that if it has FDA approval required. So we won't be really doing anything like that.
Because I know, in other markets, let's say the West Coast again, a lot of them are they're already seeing that, wearables are kind of on the out. Now they're looking at augmented reality. They're looking at, on the software side, they're looking at other, robotics, AI, etc. So they're looking at a lot of these areas. Are these of interest to you too? Or, as you mentioned, really doesn't matter as long as they have good growth? Or
yeah, I guess certainly, I think our North Star for the Great North Labs Fund is really just leveraging disruptive technology in new ways. Okay. So, and I think a lot of the core infrastructure and a lot of the disruptive technology, those are things that Silicon Valley really excels at. Yeah. But that's okay. I think if you can understand and be a participant in markets and understand the technology, there's, industries are going to be shaped by these disruptive technologies. And as long as you're sort of an early adopter and you understand the capabilities of new technologies, look out. I mean, Uber or Airbnb didn't invent any breakthrough technologies. Exactly. It was all, iPhone was not itself a breakthrough technology, but maybe the most disruptive product in our generation. And they just were able to bring together technology in a meaningful way in all three cases, right? So that's kind of what I think in the Midwest we don't need to try to build. Quite frankly, I don't think we have quite the engineering horsepower. I mean, I'll just say that, to really. If it's going to require just thousands of PhDs and just extremely high-end engineering, we're probably not going to fare very well. But there are cases. I'm not saying there aren't
a lot of solid engineers, right? From Medtronic or companies like that.
Yeah.
Amazon, their AWS is starting up here, growing here actually fast.
I mean, I suppose the other side of that is we do have some really awesome smaller teams, and smaller teams can really do some pretty interesting things these days too. Yeah. So.
Excellent. So that leads me now to your venture fund you have. When's the next one coming up that you're looking at for companies to apply? So
the boot camp, we have 2 in January. So there's they're both on our website. So there's a Lean Product Boot Camp. It's a 15-hour program. It's all practical exercises taught by Ryan, my brother and co-founder. And then we have the following camp, we have a kind of a crash course on agile methodology from James. So taking some of the work he did for Apple and putting a curriculum around that. It's for startups and also for larger companies that want to kind of get current with the modern innovation skills.
Yeah.
We're trying to fill a gap in some of the areas where we see our processes aren't quite, especially having operated in the Bay Area for a while. We had people in our product teams from graduates of like Stanford and Wharton with lots of practical experience, and we see there's in some places we need to really step up our game on.
What do you see is lacking here in Minneapolis or St. Paul area?
I think the thing we've noticed is that the entrepreneurs tend to start building before they've done enough customer validation. That's a surefire way to just waste a lot of money. I would always encourage startups to just talk to their customers more. You can never talk to them too much, and ideally, what we teach is kind of the methods of doing, conducting interviews and doing research, so that you're doing it in as unbiased of a way as possible. It's sort of like, I think everybody talks about like the first generation of like lean startups was like Eric Ries's work, where you sort of get feedback, build, iterate, and it was just kind of and just keep iterating based on customer feedback or whatever. Yeah. I think that's kind of that's what I see like at an engineering team sometimes. It's like, oh, we're just going to get this out, then we're going to get feedback. Well, you might have shortened that cycle by releasing frequently and quickly, but you could still get a lot further by just sort of asking. You could, instead of having a 2-week release to learn something, if you could talk to your customer for 30 minutes and learn that whatever you're releasing wasn't going to be the right thing, now you just saved yourself 2 weeks. Well, magnify that by a whole lot more research, and you might have saved yourself a year or two. And by the way, you might have ran out of money in that time.
Which is kind of what you offer right now in your boot camps, right? You have free camps, right?
Yeah.
Are they free?
They're free for startups, and then they're paid for larger companies.
And it's in St. Cloud or St. Cloud and Minneapolis area?
Our intention is to roll them out all around the Midwest, but for now we've been rotating between St. Cloud and the Twin Cities.
Okay.
So the next one, I think the upcoming product one is at the University of Minnesota Carlson.
Okay.
So
good for
sign
anybody.
up or tell your friends.
Go to, definitely. I mean, I'm fully on board with you.
And I assure you, if you go spend 15 hours there, you will walk out of there know exactly what you need to do with your startup to get venture funded. There's no way you can walk out of there and not know, unless you fall asleep the whole time. Maybe.
That's how interesting.
Exactly.
No, Ryan's a really.
He's
cool
not the more interesting twin.
But he's good at softball. You gotta admit that, right?
Good. It's all relative. It's all relative.
It's all relative. Yeah. So you have that class, and where are they? So you said University of Minnesota, and then downtown St. Cloud is near the SCSU campus. So you kind of stay near the universities.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing. Our intention is just, we're our own sort of lean startup, so we capture feedback after every one of these boot camps, and then we come back and try to iterate, make it better and stronger. And kind of our vision with this startup school is we'll add other practical skills. It's not lecture. It's like less than 10% lecture. It's all practical exercises that that can help you really help. And it's also very peer driven, so you're getting feedback from. You may not have your customers there, but you might have other, these other startup teams that you can talk to, and they can kind of give you feedback on your idea.
How often do you have these classes?
We're trying to do them monthly.
A monthly, okay.
Yeah.
And then you can start from, is it every month like a tier? Do you learn more in-depth stuff about product management? Or
they're actually the same courses currently. Okay. We probably will graduate and have more, maybe more advanced courses over time, but we're just getting started.
I fully agree with him. Product marketing, you have to definitely do a lot of that before you even launch your product out there. Know your end user, get out there, get on the street. A lot of companies that are good with that are food companies, right? You see it in Cub Foods or whatever, they're giving a free sample, trying to see, do they like this product over that product? Do they like the taste? And then you collect that little data. And I've seen it so many times too, where people just build it and then think, oh, we can fix it later. And that's the wrong step. And don't build too much into it, just make it lean. Just do the minimum thing you need to do, launch it small steps like Rob just mentioned, and then take it back, get with your product management team, your design team, and then launch another beta part of that project as well. So excellent. I'll open it up to questions now if anybody has any other questions. So this was more or less to kind of introduce you to Rob Weber and Ryan, his co-founder. So you have those free product classes that you can take part in, which definitely you should do, I'll do it too. I could use a refresher course. And then, yeah, definitely sign up for his VC fund if you think you're at that phase or you have an interesting product that'll catch his eye. And if you have 80 time growth, come to him. Like you said, you'll get a big bag of cash right away. You don't even have to talk to him about the product.
I always have a checkbook with me.
Excellent. And any questions out there in the crowd?
So what's been the most successful marketing strategy that you've seen implemented, like most ROI for the investment in that?
Marketing. Yeah, that's.
Whether it's a social media campaign or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think I was thinking about our own journey as entrepreneurs. When we had Freeze.com back when we worked together, we were publishing PC software, and back then, this was right before Facebook really, still like at Harvard, and Zuckerberg was still 22, and I was only 26 maybe back then, and we had a marketing analyst who was kind of researching what kind of PC software we'd want to publish, and we were looking around and we saw this, there was this thing called MySpace, and everybody was trying to pimp their profile or make it look all, jazzy. So we ended up building an graphic editor for your MySpace account. So we put $10,000 into it, and I think we ended up making like $5 or $10 million off of it. Wow. It's the highest ROI I've ever seen on anything I've ever been a part of in my life. Like, wow. Probably, I'm trying to back that out. Would that be like that 10 grand? That 10 grand on a per dollar basis probably would rival like Airbnb, first money into Airbnb or Uber. It wasn't scalable, it was a single product, and it didn't last. Yeah, we kept it. There's no defensibility in this thing either, but thankfully, we weren't out there telling all our competitors about it. So it was a huge cash cow for 2 or 3 years, and we, I think every company got huge bonuses, or every employee did probably those 2 or 3 years. But it wasn't even really, it wasn't paid advertising, it was just the marketing insight to see that, there's this sort of new thing that just, with MySpace that came out of everywhere, and there's all of a sudden huge demand for people to edit their MySpace page, and I only wish that Facebook didn't crush them so fast. but yeah, I love that there's been so many of these great growth marketing kind of hacks. Every big successful company seems to have one, whether it's Airbnb in the early days kind of exploited some vulnerabilities in Craigslist to kind of post their listings. And that was really key to them getting to their first, really to get off the ground. Or you have PayPal, and the way, if you read, there's a book called I think it's called The PayPal War. It's a book about the first few years of PayPal. They some of the guerrilla marketing things they were doing. And I have a personal blog where I kind of have profiled some of these, but it's just unbelievable. If you dig down and we could go back and forth on tell me a company, I could probably tell you some growth hack that they had that was really critical. And then I think people they don't remember how they got there. They just remember that they're there, and they're enamored by, look at Airbnb, it's a juggernaut. It's what, $50 billion or whatever I don't know, however big they are. But in those early days, they were kind of street fighting, and there was, some really strong guerrilla marketing in there that kind of got them there.
Anybody else? You don't have to, and he's going to be around for another good 15 minutes, I hope, afterwards. You're free to ask your questions then, direct eye to eye. So at this time, I'm going to take the advantage to thank our major sponsor, which is Sunrise Banks. We have Mark Gabriel here, from Director of Innovation. Thank you again. So all the food, beer, drinks, it's all on Sunrise Banks.
Here.
So thank you. And a very big thanks also to Creed Interactive here. So this beautiful office space that they gave also for free for this entrepreneurial event. Thank you, Jonathan. So feel free to talk to Mark and Jonathan after as well. But yeah, thank you for coming to the Startup Grind event. Hope to see you next time. And I do want to I have two kind of gifts here too. So one is from Sunrise Banks. So it's kind of who do you think? Well, we only had one question. Anybody else? I was going to say the most intriguing question. So you're the default winner. You get the free card from Sunrise. All right. So That's all good.
Nicola, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Sunrise Banks there. So.
Thank you.
And then we are gonna, I don't know, we're gonna have to, did anybody else have an intriguing question? Because we have a free iPhone case
We should
from
see
Ideal
who can,
Sweden.
who can slam a beer the fastest.
I do have a question, actually.
Yeah. Dang it. Never
All
mind.
right, go ahead.
I want to know what your thoughts are on kind of this co-working space phenomenon, and in relation to, you know, software, big data, if that has any overlap or overlay, or what do you think about those kind of new pop-ups?
I don't know. I think co-working space is interesting. There's sort of pros and cons to it. I think though having good space and density of startup activity is helpful. So I think people, you know, it's good to have people you can talk to and collaborate with, even if you're not even working on it. Obviously, you're probably not working on the same problem as the people sitting around you, but just I think part of it is just those first couple of years of launching a startup are not the easiest years usually, and if it's even just to keep your head up, like I think it's good to be in these co-working spaces. You know, I find it difficult as like running a venture fund. You know, we're talking about really in-depth kind of diligence questions or financing questions, and you know, I find open collaborative space not to be the most conducive to, you know, a lot of the conversations we're having. Although we're kind of co-working.
I mean
here,
you'll find some
so.
good phase companies. Sometimes they're too young at the co-working offices. Sometimes there'll be like a sales branch where Salesforce might be here, or BuzzFeed, or whomever utilizing the office because they need that for a sales team. But yeah, it's a catch-22. I think it's great. I myself have used them before and use it because it's a lot better than just sitting in one building with 4 walls if you're a small team, right? So definitely there's advantages to them. You get free hosting for events. They do their own events. So they kind of keep it like a close-knit family. But kind of like what you said, it's, you know, I was always expecting more from these co-work spaces where I would be there and I'm looking for a developer. I'm looking for a designer to connect me. They don't really connect you. They just want you to rent their space. And yeah, they have an event once a month, but they don't really do the due diligence
I guess
to know what their community is about, really.
They are for-profit businesses, I guess almost all the ones I'm aware of, and their pricing is probably twice what market is for the same space. So I think if it is convenience. It's great to be able to sort of check in, and you know, you can get a membership and leave and have that flexibility, and it's usually pretty cool space. But you know, if you're scaling an organization, it gets, you know, you're probably not doing it in a co-working space.
Yeah.
And it's not cost effective over time.
I mean, they say WeWork had some companies that really grew only within their organization and then left. You know, when you get big enough, they can usually.
You know, WeWork just bought Meetup.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
So
very interesting.
Exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those companies that are very highly valued. I'm not sure if they're worth their value, but yeah, it's a great place. It's a great community.
I support Coco because they're one of our own. So
That's great.
I know the WeWork space is nice too, but
I don't use it right now. I
Yeah.
use it in San Francisco.
I would recommend Coco. Let's keep it local, right?
I like local as well. Industrious also, I think, is a local one
Yeah.
too. So they're really good. They're very much similar style to WeWork. Or here, right? He's also looking to, you have some office space here that's rentable too, right?
Yeah, we have an interesting model where we only come in the office 2 days a week, so our space is empty three days a week. So we actually had a structural Scott Burns company lease with us for the summer until they bought their own building. But that worked out great, the timeshare space.
Horrible company to work for, right? You work from home 3 days a week and 2 days in office. I mean, that must be torture, right? No, it's awesome. So yeah, if anybody knows of anybody that's looking, that's great. I mean, look at this beautiful environment here. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Wow,
So
that's awesome. Yeah, maybe have to follow up on
there you
that.
go. You should be in St. Paul.
Yeah,
not Minneapolis.
why not?
Excellent. If there's no other questions, we'll mingle now, and I thank you all for coming. Next event is going to be with Ilo's Video. I'll let you know ahead of time.
A much younger founder than me.
Very energetic, very cool software that they've developed, video conferencing and stuff like that. So yeah, also St. Paul startup. So that's planned to be mid-January, or it could be postponed to March. My bad, because I'm going to be in London. So Yeah, excellent. So thank you again, Rob, and much success to you and Ryan on your new venture fund here. And yeah, Toy, keep it Midwest, love it, grow it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can you get this phone case from Ideal Suite?
Sure.
Hey, what do you,
For 6, 7, 8.